I gotta say, I'm like borderline delirious from not sleeping. And I can tell you I'm really looking forward to doing 5+ straight hours of podcasting in that condition.
Sweet.
But despite that, in the various short breaks I have taken while working on this article to like play blitz chess, I've been crushing it.
Sweet.
I don't know how.
Well, you just learned that sleep is your enemy.
Yeah. That's why I'm...
Work productivity, chess skill, all of it has been stolen from you by the villain called sleep. You need to figure out some way to stay awake for longer.
Yeah. Turns out my brain stem is by itself exceptionally good at chess compared to my conscious mind.
Yeah.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me as always, Phil McKenzie.
Hello.
Phil's sick. I'm sleep deprived. Phil, I'll tell you right now, I didn't even tell you this before the air. I pulled an all-nighter last night. Working.
Oh, yeah.
So I am operating on 0 sleep and a shitload of coffee because I have what I think will be quite a good article on Khamzat Chimaev coming out very shortly, probably concurrent with when you're hearing this episode on Bloody Elbow.
Excellent. So I'm hoping this is going to be like one of those things where it's everything about Khamzat Chimaev and his opponents and MMA in general has simply lodged itself like into your conscious mind. So
yeah.
You just have like visions of his ground and pound floating past you, and it's just going to make you a very insightful, if slightly woozy, podcast contributor.
That's right. And you're barely recovered from an illness. You say it's not COVID, but that's,
subject to the extremely old COVID tests thing that I used.
That's right. And, of course, fears about reprisal from your countrymen for, based on whether or not you got the jab, as you guys like to say. Anyway, yeah, it was exactly Chimaev's ground and pound that I spent the entire night researching and writing about. I'm calling it, Phil, you'll like this, The Science of Smesh.
Very nice.
Yeah. So I'm well booked up on that. That is only one, however, of the fights taking place on this weekend's upcoming UFC pay-per-view. That is UFC 294. And speaking of Khamzat Chimaev, he strikes again, Phil. Remember the last time this Chechen bastard was on a pay-per-view? Remember what happened?
Yeah.
Yes,
I remember the whole thing completely disintegrating around him.
The entire card just inexplicably imploded, and all the top fights were just seemingly at random, just swapped and mismatched. And I gotta say, they've done a better job of it here than they did last time, probably because this time they had a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks notice to put some new fights together. Last time it was literally the day before, I believe, the event. But we are not getting the fights that we have spent the last several weeks looking forward to at the top of this UFC 294 card. We were expecting Islam Makhachev to rematch former champion Charles Oliveira. Instead, he will be rematching featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski in his second bid to move up and become a double champ. We can talk about how we feel about that, given that, the last fight was super interesting, and obviously we're always down to see Volkanovski ply his trade, but 2 weeks notice doesn't really feel like, I don't know, the sort of context that a fighter of Volkanovski's stature deserves. for his second attempt to fight up a weight class. And then, speaking of fighters going up in weight, Khamzat Chimaev was supposed to take on Bohashinya Paulo Costa in the co-main event. Instead, he's fighting former welterweight champion Kamaru Usman at middleweight. So I don't know what the fuck is going on.
Yeah, I think the last card destruction could have been plausibly explained by someone wishing on some kind of monkey's paw type thing. But they just wanted Nate Diaz to win.
Yeah.
In the main event.
I mean, don't get me wrong.
The gods were like, there's only one way we can make this happen. He's not beating Khamzat Chimaev. And so they had to, dismantle the card and reassemble it so that Nate ended up fighting an extremely washed Tony Ferguson.
Right.
That one could be explained. But yeah, this one, I think it's just, raw, chaotic energy. And they're maybe we're just never going to see Khamzat Chimaev in a normal card.
Yeah. I mean, Oliveira did say after his last fight that he wasn't going to be ready for this date. We assumed that the UFC must have thrown some serious money or else some serious threats his way to get him to accept. I gotta wonder if he knew he had an injury he needed to recover from, and that is exactly what cropped up. Cropped up here and forced him to withdraw. That seems likely.
I mean, given what his injury was, it's that it was his.
What is the injury?
His he got a cut over his brow, right?
Oh, okay, all right. Then never mind. It was just a training camp injury.
Yeah. Paulo Costa, meanwhile, has what looks like an insanely disgusting staph infection in his
arm. Okay. I just assumed why.
An absolutely vile one. Yes.
I just assumed.
He actually has a genuinely very good excuse. Yes. I was also like, Paulo Costa's just pulling out because he's a crazy person, but no. Yeah. He has a giant, disgusting, flesh tunnel.
Oh, God. Should be his new nickname.
Look it up on Twitter if you want to be grossed out.
I don't. And I won't. But yeah, UFC 294, I mean, inexplicable in some ways, bizarre, but kind of cool fights, I guess. I don't know. Let's get into it.
I think they're cool.
Yeah, I mean, how can you argue that they're not? It's just big asterisks, unfortunately. But the main event, Islam Makhachev defending his belt again versus pound-for-pound great, featherweight king Alexander Volkanovski. Their last fight was super close. I reviewed it. I still think Makhachev won. A lot of people don't agree. But it was definitely very revealing and in many ways completely defied our expectations of what that style matchup should have looked like.
Yeah. I mean, in general, I just want to say, I said this at the time when they had their last fight, but, this just reinforces it for me. We're really privileged to have fighters like both Alexander Volkanovski and Islam Makhachev.
Yeah.
Because these are, I think, the two most sort of established good fighters in their relevant divisions at the moment. They are at the peak of their powers.
Yep. And,
they're willing to take these insanely risky fights against one another. They could just keep thrashing the division that's below them, as pretty much all of the dominant champions have in the past.
Yeah, with or without
GSP
a full camp.
And yeah.
Go on. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, GSP and Jones, changed weight classes, but this was, long after their primes were over, and essentially it was just a kind of house money situation. But it's not just the, and you can say that Volkanovski is the one who's taking more risks, but in some ways he isn't really. Because
he doesn't stand to lose his belt.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't stand to lose his belt. Makhachev has already beaten him. He doesn't need to beat him again.
Yep.
Makhachev could just ask for them to put in a schmo for him to fight. Or, the equivalent of when the equivalent of when Khabib fought what's his face for the vacant lightweight belt.
Iaquinta, maybe.
Iaquinta, yes. Like it could just the equivalent of that. Someone who's like decent but who has no functional chance of actually winning.
Right.
But instead, and it was the fact that for his first title defense, Islam was like, I want Volkanovski in Australia.
Yeah.
Like, these two guys are, like, tremendously skilled, and, all-time greats for their divisions, and also, yeah, just, like, willing to put it on the line at times when most people don't. And I am, very happy we get to see them fight again, even if, it might not be in the most ideal circumstances.
Yeah.
The fact is that, neither of them are that young, Volkanovski in particular, and the ideal circumstances just won't be around for very long.
Yeah. And with or without a full training camp, I was going to say, surely Islam Makhachev would be justified in preferring to fight Charles Oliveira. I mean, there's not many fighters that can say that. Basically none at this point, given what Oliveira's done to the entire rest of the lightweight elite. But Makhachev trounced him, and he did not trounce Volkanovski. It is undoubtedly a much more difficult and higher risk fight. Yeah. And I'll also add that I think we said this at the time. As much as I think we both agreed, Makhachev got it. He got it done. Volkanovski, being sort of nominally the loser, seemed to have a more kind of obvious direction in which to kind of grow his game plan for a future rematch. Like, I think I recall us saying a Volkanovski win seemed somehow more in reach after that first fight than it did beforehand, because what we discovered is that, okay, maybe he was over-focused on the wrestling and his striking looked a little sloppier than it often does, and Islam's striking looked very principled and very solid, and he pretty much outstruck Volkanovski for long portions of the fight. But Volkanovski really didn't struggle with the A game of Makhachev as we suspected he would. He actually fended off the takedowns remarkably well. He won the scrambles when he had to win them. And by the end of the fight, a light bulb went off and he realized, wait, I can actually offensively wrestle this guy and beat him in that phase if I need to. So the game plan, the little adjustments necessary to maybe win this fight this time around, love to see a full camp to set those lessons in, but it does seem pretty achievable for Volkanovski. Again, the fight was not that one-sided.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this in terms of the adaptations that both guys need to make. In some ways, I feel like the adaptations favor Volkanovski more, as in his adaptations can be made within a smaller time scale.
Yeah.
Because I think the main things that he kind of needed to work on were, A, being happy with small wins, because there's been a lot, Volkanovski has said himself about how he's just an incredibly calm customer in the cage, right? And, you can see that with a lot of, we talked about it so much with him fighting off submissions and so on, and his ability to adapt. But I do think that he perhaps underestimates other estimates of his own emotional, makeup, because I think he does get overexcited.
Certainly, yeah.
And that really happened in this fight, because he stunned Makhachev really early into the fight, somewhere in round one.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just yeah, come on, let's go. It's again, this is something which obviously helps to fuel him as a fighter, but I think it also, it led to him thinking, the kind of thing that I did doing this, wading forward with a shifting combination, is really working. This guy is getting wrecked by this.
Yep.
I just need to go back to this again and again. And then, Makachev started to prove himself to be a quite competent counterpuncher.
Yep.
And hurt him pretty badly. I mean, I think this is not a unique thing to the Makachev fight. I mean, this happened against Rodriguez. I noticed at one point when Volkanovski had him sort of guessing near the cage and was going to lunge in. I think he just gets so bound up in thinking, I'm going to make you guess what's coming, as he's getting into one of his sort of feinting, when he's like, feinting, throwing. He just doesn't think about what's coming back at him. And Rodriguez just punches him right in the face.
Yep.
And I think, for Volkanovski, I think he just needs to be happy when he gets small wins, because this fight was not decided by large margins, and much of what lost him rounds was mostly in rounds when he debatably already had a lead, where he tried to force it by chasing Makachev down. Yeah,
he handed Makachev one big moment. Actually, I think that was the thing in round one, where Makachev got like a flash knockdown on him. He charged forward into a counter left, and was otherwise doing very well. And we know Volkanovski can win a fight based on an accumulation of small victories. Like, he is more than capable of being a super principled, disciplined fighter. But yeah, it was like unexpectedly. I mean, we didn't expect this either. He lost a lot of the standing portions of this fight by handing Makachev like big round-winning moments, running into counterpunches and just like over chasing. And I think you're totally right. Like, Volkanovski does not freak out, but he certainly gets amped. And that is the one way in which he can kind of lose his focus and his discipline in a fight. And yeah, I think all he has to do this time is just not do that. I think
on that note, round winning and getting up on point scoring and so on. The low kicks.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that we didn't see from Volkanovski in that fight really was his low kicking game. I think perhaps because he was scared of the takedowns.
Sure.
But again, if he can rationalize the fact that he doesn't have to worry about the takedowns quite so much because he's better at getting out of them than he thought he was, I think it's also because he's just more comfortable low kicking against orthodox opponents.
That's almost certainly
I think
part.
much of his jabbing and low kicking game is obviously attuned to the close stance matchup. But yeah, he needs to low kick Islam more. It's not like Islam was checking them much when he did go to them. And yeah, it's even if he just throws them non-committal. Again, it's a way to build up points, as he did against Jose Aldo. And I'm realizing I am basically calling for him to replicate the Jose Aldo game plan of just like rack up points with low kicks and non-committal strikes.
Which then was an impressive.
He can actually burn time in the clinch, it seems, and potentially even tire Islam out.
Yeah, Makhachev was absolutely like gassing by the end of that fight, and so any kind of additional attritive work that Volkanovski can muster, obviously seems like it would be a great investment, as it always is. What fight is there ever that we don't say this person should work the body? Have they thought of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that part of it too was Volkanovski's own expectation that he could not afford to let Makhachev initiate wrestling sequences with him, because I think it's pretty clear. I mean, partly it is him being fresher over the course of the fight, and God, I hope that. I mean, I suspect Volkanovski stays in really good shape all the time, but I really hope that the lack of a full camp doesn't mean that we can't count on his typically like stellar gas tank. That would be a bummer. But I think you can see, in addition to Makhachev getting tired as the fight goes on, you can see Volkanovski coming to the realization that actually, like, he just doesn't have to worry so much about the tie-ups. He had an answer, and I think it was because he has such a wrestling counter-oriented clinch game. Like, he was able to beat Makhachev in tie-ups like basically no other fighters can, because he doesn't just play defense when he's getting clinched up. He will attack Makhachev's base. That guy, I wish I knew his proper name, Ghost21, who did the Wei Li Zhang scouting reports, was posting some nice clips of Volkanovski comparing Makhachev's hip toss or Harai Goshi or whizzer kick or whatever you want to call it against Oliveira to his attempt against Volkanovski. And against Oliveira, he baited him in like just sort of a whizzer and frame kind of clinch by throwing a knee to the body. And Chucky fired a knee back, and Makhachev wanted that to happen. He waited for him to set his foot back down and immediately flung him over with the whizzer kick. And against Volkanovski, same thing, except that Volkanovski then immediately attacks him with a trip and tries to counter it, and Makhachev has to bail. And this is what it looked like Volkanovski was increasingly finding out over the course of the fight, is like, I don't have to just play defense. Like, I actually can pose threats in these clinches, and I just don't think that's a situation that Islam is used to dealing with. I mean, it's been a while since we talked about the physical difference between him and Khabib. Obviously, he has all of Khabib's technical prowess, and he has Khabib's excellent game planning. And I wouldn't put it past him to come up with some really nice, subtle adjustments of his own for this fight. But probably, like, Volkanovski, weirdly, as a featherweight, is one of the strongest dudes he's ever had to wrestle with. And, like, is genuinely imposing in the clinch. And that just bore itself out more and more as the fight wore on. So, yeah, let's talk about Makhachev. I mean, what might he do differently? It's always a little tougher, I think, for the winner to make the correct adjustments, but no guy should really feel like an absolute winner because the fight was super close.
Yeah. So this is why I kind of think that Makhachev's adjustments need more time than Volkanovski's. I mean, because I think that's the camp that they are. You know, the Khabib.
Yeah.
The Khabib camp has traditionally been one where you really get the idea that they scout their opponents from a long way away.
I mean, speaking of Khabib's fight with Iaquinta, that was one where he had no time to scout, and it was a much more sort of improvisational performance than we were used to seeing out of him.
But yeah, I mean, again, this is a credit to Islam that he is willing to risk his belt.
Absolutely.
Against someone who is, the absolute polar opposite to Charles Oliveira.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, dangerous opponents. There's very little to him. But anyway, so I think the main thing, which I think would obviously help in this fight, is back attacks. Whether it would be jumping on the back or just, kicking out the rear leg and taking down Volk from there, or basically, just having a coherent, like, back attack game, because that was Volkanovski's primary solution to the grappling, to the wrestling attempts, is that he turned his back, fought hands, and basically drove his head into the fence, meaning that, Makhachev either had to kind of try and drag him away, or try and turn him around and peel him off without kind of access to his center of gravity. And I think, just the ability to have, like, a bunch of different things they can go for from that position would help a lot. I think the problem is that I don't think Islam would have been training this for Oliveira, because why would you be?
Sure.
And and that like that kind of thing is not as easy to paste into your game as things which we know Alexander Volkanovski does well, and can do, like low kicks and taking what he's given.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is stuff that we've seen him implement in fights. So I think that he just needs to have a coherent plan for attacking the back when Volk gives up his back. Secondarily, stuff he can do, I think, which is easier, is he himself needs to kick more, because it worked great for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Body kick, head kick. Like, it was his... When Volk wasn't overreaching on his rushes, it was money for Islam. And it was one of the things which kind of made him have to overreach on rushes.
Yeah. And to facilitate that, I think another, not exactly straightforward, but pretty simple thing that Makhachev can do is, he revealed, we'd seen it before, but didn't realize the extent to which it would be effective, but he revealed some really nice, counterpunching, largely with like straight punches and just good positioning. But, he could probably afford to like pressure Volkanovski more this time. Being in that, his jab was super effective, both as a counter and as a lead. And, he has a big reach advantage. Like, if you're throwing good straight punches from a solid stance from the correct angle, a reach advantage is a really big factor. And he is a very simple, but really quite sound southpaw boxer with a great southpaw jab, a really good 1-2. And every now and then a hook on the counter, like he dropped Chucky Olives with. But really, those straight punches should be really useful pressuring tools. And I think a big part of what wore him out in the last fight was the fact that he felt he had to keep going for wrestling and grappling attacks on Volkanovski. He was allowing himself to be pressured, looking for the counters, and not standing his ground, expecting that Volkanovski was going to dash in and he could take him down, which did happen sometimes. I mean, even as late as the fourth round, he'd do exactly what you're talking about and completely clamped onto Volkanovski's back and spent a ton of time with Volk just sort of grinning and punching behind his head. It was super effective, but exhausting. Like I said, Volkanovski is really strong and himself has fantastic cardio, and he will make you scramble for dear life as long as you allow him any kind of freedom of movement. I think Makhachev could pressure, and the kicking game would only be more effective if he's backing Volkanovski up and keeping him on the end of his reach. Maybe Volkanovski doesn't have his full gas tank. Maybe he's not as fully trained as he should be after a normal camp. Maybe just thwacking him in the belly over and over with that beautiful left kick Makhachev has could be really effective in wearing him down over the course of the fight. Like, however much his game plan might not apply here, Makhachev is the guy with the full camp. He knew he was fighting on this date months and months in advance. So, yeah, I would really like to see Makhachev. I mean, I was super impressed with the striking. I would like to see him standing his ground and working to back Volkanovski up. I think he could do it. Volkanovski is not impervious defensively, and yeah, I mean, even like Max Holloway was quite effective using his jab and his reach in their second fight. Volkanovski's little. Like, just use that reach, use those straight punches, use that good positioning. So,
yeah. Although, admittedly, if he pressures, it does remove the. It does, to at least some extent, remove the need for Volkanovski to wade in after him, which is where he put himself at the most risk.
For sure, yeah. I mean, there's a balancing act here. I don't think he needs to pressure him the whole time, but I think he could afford to walk him down some. And, if Volkanovski comes in here trying to accept small victories, it might just be very even on the feet if he's less aggressive. Who knows? Anyway, it's very exciting. Yeah. It's a shame that it has the the weird asterisks attached to it because it was such a fascinating fight the first time. And like you said, it's just like the pinnacle of MMA. I think these are probably the two best pound for pound fighters on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to see it again.
Yeah.
Who you picking?
I think, you know what? I think I might pick Volkanovski just because I feel like, as I said, his adjustments maybe take less time than Islam's do. Like, I think Islam, to put together things like a back take game and so on, in this amount of time when he's been preparing for someone completely different,
right,
is challenging. Whereas I feel like Volkanovski was rebuilding his game for Makhachev whilst they fought, and then we saw that he'd rebuilt his. You saw how much that had informed who he was as a fighter. In his next fight with Yair Rodriguez, they were just like, "All right, he's really leaning into this wrestling thing now." And we said that was probably what he was going to do. He was probably going to crush Yair on the ground because clearly he'd remembered that he's really good at this stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just feel like despite the fact that it's short notice, I feel like it's actually the notice is in some ways more detrimental. It's obviously more detrimental from a physical preparedness sense for Volkanovski, but from a strategic preparedness sense, I feel like it disfavors Islam. And as I said, it's one of the things that makes it's such a great matchup because so many people wouldn't accept it.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a dangerous fight for him. And yeah, I just hope that whoever wins it, people don't bitch and whine or complain, say that Volkanovski, if he loses this one, he probably won't get another chance. And, if he does, just accept that he tried his best and it didn't work, rather than people are going to be like, well, short notice and you should get another shot and all this kind of stuff. Just accept that, it was two great fighters who took big risks against each other. Whoever wins and whoever loses, just, appreciate them for being, just willing to take risks at the top of the sport.
You dare stand in the way of my God-given right to bitch and whine, Phil? You think that's going to stop me? Just because you say so?
It's futile. Better to tell the ocean to be respectful than to tell it to the internet.
Yeah. I think I have zero confidence either way. That's how close the last fight was. But I totally agree with your assessment. I think there's more than enough reason. We both picked Makhachev last time. We were right, but not in the way we expected to be. Not fully. I agree with your assessment that Volkanovski is just innately, I think, the better on-the-fly adjuster between these two. Makhachev, I think, like Khabib, really gets a lot done with his homework and studying his opponents and coming up with the correct approach in advance. And assuming that Volkanovski is in a good physical condition, it just seems like, when has this guy ever not been super, super impressive in rematches? He's unbelievable. What's that?
Max Holloway 2.
Even Max Holloway 2. He got out-adjusted, and then he readjusted and figured Max the fuck out. Even in that fight. So yeah, I expect there will still be some momentum shifts and some really, really tight swing rounds, and people will argue about it. I expect it to be that close. And if it's going to be that close, and I have faith in Volkanovski's ability to make adjustments either in advance or over the course of the fight, yeah, why not pick him? Sure.
We've damned him now.
Yeah, oh, he's doomed for sure. He's
getting submitted in round 1.
Yeah,
but yeah, I could watch these guys fight every week.
100%.
I could watch these guys fight every week.
I know it doesn't really get better than this. All right, let's take a break on that unusually optimistic note. When we come back, the bearer of the curse himself, Khamzat Chimaev, is taking on Kamaru Usman, who, we'll talk about this next segment, is going to have both Trevor Whitman and Henry Hooft in his corner, I have heard.
Ooh.
A true clash of personalities and, I believe, coaching styles and strategic preferences. So I'm very curious to see how that plays out. If they have a sort of good dad, bad dad thing going on between them.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Right. Trevor's telling Kamaru to like be patient and jab, and Henry Hooft is just like grumbling, and you know, I'm sure he's probably the second, not the chief corner. So anyway, we'll talk about that and that matchup after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
All right, Phil, so what the fuck? We have understandably high expectations for Volkanovski. We've seen him fight up in weight once before. We've seen him in that particular matchup once before, and he performed more than admirably. Kamaru Usman at middleweight, just after losing his title to Leon Edwards? What the hell does that look like? This one I have a really hard time wrapping my head around. I gotta be honest.
I mean, the good thing about it is that it is Kamaru Usman at middleweight against someone who is nominally a welterweight who has only ever fought against other welterweights.
Yeah.
I mean, the kind of good thing about it is that this is one of those fights that people always sort of expected they were going to see at some point, right?
Yeah, I mean, having just watched a ton of Chimaev footage, Dan Hardy, I think, was on commentary when he fought John Phillips or Rhys McKee, who Dan Hardy, who always has a soft spot for any fighter from the British Isles, was like, we shouldn't count Rhys McKee out. We shouldn't underestimate him. I'm like, damn.
Perish the thought.
He was never, ever going to win this fight. But, yeah, in his, either the Rhys McKee or the John Phillips bout, he was like, I want to see this guy fight Kamaru Usman. That's the matchup everyone's been talking about since Chimaev burst onto the UFC scene.
It started slaughtering.
Absolute bums.
Notably not particularly good fighters.
Absolute bums who are, it has to be said, always were basically a weight class beneath him because he is huge and has been a tremendous size bully throughout pretty much all of his MMA career. And here, you know, he's fighting a guy who is very big for a welterweight, very notably physically strong, and somebody who is, you know, old, but still undoubtedly a great wrestler. I mean, it's certainly a much more testing matchup than Chimaev has ever had, outside of perhaps Gilbert Burns. But, I mean, Usman... Yeah, go on.
Yeah, logically you have to be like, of course, Usman would be a more challenging matchup for Chimaev than Burns would be, because Burns is short and has been out-wrestled before and crushed from top position before and size bullied before. So when Khamzat couldn't do that, it was simultaneously impressive that he had like the grit and the physical cardio to actually, go through a tough fight like that in what was clearly his first actual experience of doing that in a major fight.
Mm-hmm.
But also, you were like, oh, right. He is mortal. He's not going to be able to crush even, moderately favorable style matchups in the way that, like, people suggested he might be able to, including kind of us. Or me, anyway.
Well, we were both. I mean, everyone was absolutely just completely high on Chimaev. He was so fucking impressive. Yeah, I don't think
but also, like, I'd seen Gilbert Burns against giant people before, and, like, really concerted wrestlers. And I think, the main thing which brought home, apart from, Khamzat Chimaev is a super gritty guy, is that, like, he's a much worse offensive wrestler than I thought he was.
Well,
when he's not, like...
Yeah.
When he's not, like, much bigger, and, when he doesn't have both a wrestling and a size advantage over the opponent.
Yeah, because that is the other thing, is that he has not only been bigger, he has also just had a distinct skill advantage. Like, the best wrestler he's fought was the Leech, who was pretty thoroughly out-wrestled by Jake Matthews. I mean, the Leech is a good wrestler, but he's not a great wrestler. And then he fought Gilbert Burns, who is a great wrestler, and the size alone, without the disparity in skill and technique, was just not enough.
Yeah. So, I think Chimaev remains a good wrestler, a remarkable scrambler. I mean, still, like, his pure wrestling, I think, is perhaps not as like effective as
particularly his takedown, his takedown skill. Right? Because his mat wrestling, I think, is also like second to none. It's very, very good. It's very much like Khabib's.
Yeah, his fusion of his ability to scramble, his fusion of striking and submissions on the mat.
Yeah,
like his ability to control positions, all absolutely stellar.
Positional grappling,
his ability to get there is weaker, and what has bailed him out in those when that doesn't matter is the fact that he is a accurate and hard puncher with a great gas tank and a great chin.
Yeah. Which he really, really, really relied on against Gilbert, because he got dropped in that fight and he got nailed with huge shots on multiple occasions.
Because a lot of that striking game is just built around the fear of the accurate straight punches being things which are going to just finish you off.
Yep.
Or at least put you at a distance and, scare you into a point where he can just start unloading on you or pick up the clinch. But Gilbert Burns just kept dinging him because he didn't have any defense.
Yep. No defense at all. I'll just add to that in the Kevin Holland and Reese McKee fights, again, I've watched all the Chimaev footage a lot. Chimaev, I mean, he has a really quick, powerful shot, and usually that just blasts his UFC opponents off their feet. But both Kevin Holland and even Reese McKee managed to, I think they both sort of got taken down but kept their whizzer and popped back up to their feet. And it was actually the second layer. It was the spin around to the back, to the rear waist cinch. And against both of them, Chimaev just sort of picked them up and like dragged them down. This helped a very like forceful secondary layer of his takedown game. Really, really helpful in that case that he is so huge. I have a very hard time seeing him be able to miss a shot against someone like Kamaru Usman and then just sort of whiz around to his back and pick him up off his feet. Like, that ain't happening. It didn't happen against Gilbert. And Kamaru is a better wrestler than Gilbert. I have to assume even now, however shot his knees may be. So yeah, that just really puts in perspective, I think, the actual technical limitations of Chimaev's takedown game. Impressive as his takedowns are, in the one instance we have seen them tried against an elite wrestler, they simply did not work.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, again, he did get Gilbert Burns down several times, but it's just like Gilbert just kept scrambling with him, and he couldn't keep him down.
No.
You know, that one, especially that one particularly cool moment where Gilbert just boots him off him.
Yeah.
Very fun.
Yeah, just kicks him in the chest. That was sick.
So the main thing I found myself thinking is that, like, this is probably just going to be quite kickboxy, right?
Yeah, it seems like it has to be. Or possibly Usman trying to out-wrestle Chimaev. I mean, no one's tried to do that to Chimaev. I don't know that it's a great idea, but if anyone can do it, it would probably be Usman. Just because he's such a great wrestler and also such a hoss. Maybe.
I mean, Burns tried some takedowns on Chimaev, and they did not work at all.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think Usman is a better wrestler, particularly in the clinch. Like, maybe if not even taking Chimaev down, then just getting head position and mushing him up against the cage might be an option for him. But I do agree. I mean, I expect a lot of kickboxing, and I don't really know how that goes, because Usman gets hurt in a lot of his fights.
Yep.
And Chimaev is, as you said, he's big. I mean, even here, I should check the actual numbers. I wonder what the reach disparity is like between these guys. But he's got an excellent jab, particularly his southpaw jab is really punishing. And he just like fully commits to these long, straight, accurate punches that are really goddamn hard. He has a lot of natural power. I think it seems quite likely that if we get a kickboxing match here, Usman's probably going to get hurt early.
Yeah. I mean, that was what happened to Burns, right?
Yeah.
He just ate a hard, clean shot.
It was a jab.
Usman has a 1 inch longer reach than Chimaev.
Interesting. What's the height disparity?
2 inches.
Khamzat's 2 inches taller?
Yeah.
So they have functionally, basically, they're going to have the same reach.
Yeah. Which is weird, because I think of Usman as being like a big welterweight and Chimaev as being colossal.
Mm-hmm. No, Usman's a big fucking welterweight too. No doubt. So yeah, but I mean...
But yeah, I think...
Go on.
So, on the one hand, you can be like, maybe Usman's chin will return to its glory days when he could just shrug off huge overhand rights from people because he's going to be upper weight class.
Yeah, I would love to see it.
Yeah. Similarly, you might be it's very difficult to track Khamzat's level of progression.
Yes.
That Burns fight was, quite a long time ago for a relatively young fighter.
Mm-hmm.
And all we've seen since then is a meaningless fight against Kevin Holland. Before that, all of his fights are essentially meaningless. You just don't know how to... It's very hard to benchmark any sense of progression with this guy. I mean, one of the things is that when he first came to the UFC, the big selling point of Khamzat Chimaev was that he fought all the time.
Yeah.
Like the one of the reasons the brass loved him and pushed him so much, they were like, this guy loves fighting.
Yep.
He is, he's just willing to step in at a minute's notice. And they pushed him so hard that he got the attention of Khamzat Kadyrov and like the United Arab Emirates or wherever he's gone to live now, and so on and so forth. And yeah, has like dropped down to like one fight per year.
Yep, and he's had a lot of other concerns. He had that scuffle with Abubakar Nurmagomedov, like erratic out of cage behavior. He also had the bout with COVID, which he was trying to retire from MMA, and then Ramzan Kadyrov personally sent him, presumably sent a photo of his mother with a gun pressed to her head to Denmark or wherever it was Chimaev was living, and he was like, I guess I'm not retiring. Yeah, he's become really very inactive. He also had the weight miss, of course, which blew up the last pay-per-view he was a part of. So things have seemed very unstable for Chimaev. It's hard to believe that he could be progressing much, especially because, like in that Burns fight, it just seemed like a guy who has only ever trounced people, discovering what it felt like to not be able to completely trounce someone and basically sort of like refusing to accept it.
Mm-hmm.
Being like, no, I'm just going to do the things I like to do, but even harder. I'm going to just smash my way through. I'm going to absorb all the punches. Like, even in the moment when he got knocked down by Burns, he was swarming Burns against the cage, got hit with a huge overhand right, completely flush. And before going down, he was trying to throw like 3 more punches. Like, he just refused to stop trying to be the bully. He couldn't turn it off. And he fell down like while his like brainstem was still thinking, I'm winning this boxing exchange. So yeah, it's kind of hard for me to think that he's going to look any different or any better. At the same time, I just have no idea what Usman looks like. I mean, what did you make of the appearance of him aging as an aspect of that loss to Leon Edwards? The second loss, rather, to Leon Edwards. Did he look old to you? He looked a little old to me.
Yeah, I think so. I think in terms of his willingness to apply pressure, his speed and strength, as something that he could consistently apply, I think he definitely dropped a notch.
Yeah. Part of that was Leon having an excellent game plan and like finally understanding what he's been doing wrong his entire life, having a moment of true personal growth in the cage. But I mean, Kamaru Usman did not respond to the sort of vague suggestion of pressure that Leon put up in that fight the way that I think he would have in his younger days. As you said, he used to be an absolute juggernaut who would just like anything like Chimaev, but more technical and more adaptable. Like anything I have to walk through is fine. It's all part of the process that is winning me this fight. And I don't think he had that. He didn't look like he wanted to get hit. Like he looked a lot warier of counters, and counterintuitively, it made him easier to counter because he was pulling a lot of his shots and not committing to the pressure as he used to.
Because he was just getting kicked up at range because he was hanging out there too much.
Yeah. So
and then eventually, he had to commit to coming in and got countered. I don't know. It's one of those ones where like on a skill for skill basis, I think you sort of have to pick Kamaru Usman.
Yeah.
But on a trending basis,
yes.
You're essentially saying this is going to be a fight between 2 men, one of whom gets hurt all the time, and one of them who doesn't, one of them who's younger, and, has one of them who's younger and has not absorbed very much damage over the course of his career, and the other one who's got no knees and has absorbed quite a lot of damage over the course of his career. And it's not like Usman has a lot of defensive savvy to insulate himself here.
He's got more than Chimaev, but not a ton.
Yes, but it's not a strong point of Kamaru Usman as a fighter.
Yeah, absolutely true.
So you know what? I think I am going to pick Kamaru Usman.
Yeah.
Do I want to? I
mean, just do it. I'll pick the other way, and then one of us will be right. And we can pretend next week that we were absolutely certain in our pick instead of completely clueless, as we obviously are, and then we can mock the other for being wrong. I am going to pick Chimaev. I will add that the pace at which Chimaev fought Gilbert Burns, a pace which he was forced to maintain. right? Because like he had to keep pressing Gilbert. He had to keep him on the end of his reach. He had to keep backing him up. He does not have the defense or the ring craft to not be going full tilt at all times as long as he's on the feet or really on the ground. I mean, he's not a guy who has ever before that fight had to learn to manage his pace. There's no reason to think that he will magically know how to do it now. That is a serious concern because I think the only time I've seen Usman look sort of gassed late in a fight was that last one. And I think maybe it was him looking old, but maybe it was also the fact that Leon was booting him in the body a ton. And Chimaev's a headhunter. That man does not throw body shots of any kind. Even his kicks are like universally high kicks.
He throws a body kick every now and again.
Yeah. I mean, if he does that a lot, it'll be a great investment early in this fight. And obviously, if he can do it from southpaw, as Leon Edwards did, obviously it would be very effective. But that is my main concern, is just the thought of Usman weathering whatever he has to weather early and basically doing what Gilbert did, but not gassing as badly as Gilbert did. Being more efficient and being able to sustain a steady pace. But I'm going to go with the vibes pick. I'm going to go with the trend of the careers. I'm too uncertain about what Kamaru Usman looks like at middleweight.
Yeah.
I just don't know, and I'm too uncertain about how he'll look after that last fight. I think that has to have been a radically, like, perspective-changing result. And I just think Chimaev's going to hit him in the head a ton and just not care about what's coming back at him. And, like, you know, to an extent that'll work. That might work all the way. It's not at all unlikely that he knocks Usman out. So
yeah.
I'm going to pick Chimaev.
I think I'm going to have to join you on the vibes pick.
Come on, Phil.
I think I'm going to change my pick to the Chimaev.
All right. Well, hopefully, given the way our picks usually go, that means that I would like to see Usman win. He's a lot more.
He's infinitely less annoying than Chimaev.
Oh yeah, he's a lot more likable to me personally, and I would love to see him win. I'd love to see him get back on the winning track. Maybe he's got a little post-prime career at middleweight. Maybe he goes back to welter. Who knows? But yeah, it just feels like he's on shaky ground. We haven't mentioned, by the way, since last segment, what do you make of the corner situation? What do you expect to see there?
Oh yeah. Should be amazing.
Because we've talked a lot about the sort of shift in Kamaru Usman's priorities as a boxer since he moved from Team Evil to Trevor Whitman's tutelage. How do those two very different personalities and very different, like sets of strategic priorities, how do those coexist in the same corner?
I don't know. Amazingly is what I'm hoping. I'm hoping we just have. This is one of the ones where I'm going to genuinely be listening to the corners in between the fights. I hope we get like Trevor Whitman being like, "Hey, Kamaru, I think it would be great. You know, just super great if you could just throw that hook over his jab. You know." And then Henry Hoof just going to be like, "The whole family is ashamed of you."
You're throwing it away, Kamaru. You're throwing it away. Yeah, just pressure. Yeah, I think they should not go to the Chimaev corner at all during this fight. Every moment between rounds, stay on Usman's corner. I gotta see what that odd couple sounds like.
Why don't you try and, maybe let's try and counter that body kick.
Yeah.
We are all ashamed of you, Kamaru. This is pathetic.
Hey, they'll both be telling him to jab a lot.
That's very true.
So they will be in alignment on that. I hope that, I mean, I don't think he's been training with Hooft. I don't know. I may be wrong about that. But I would hope that, like, that does mean there's a voice in the corner telling him that he needs to, like, turn up the pace and put it on Chimaev and stay busy and not allow him to back him up. And, like put his combinations together and things like that. These are things that I think should be very, very valuable to a guy like Usman, especially as this fight goes on.
Yeah.
Not that I think Trevor Whitman is not a great coach, but again, we've talked about it, that he clearly has influenced a number of his fighters to sort of just become less aggressive, to become more well-rounded in the way that professional boxers are. And Henry Hooft
and there's still like a significant chance that like Usman nails Chimaev with hard straight punches.
Yeah.
And Chimaev tries to just wing back at him because he's like, I've never been hit by straight punches before.
Yeah, no kidding.
And then he just gets, increasingly hurt incredibly badly. Like, it's not outside the realm of possibility.
No. But I'm taking the young guy who has yet to learn that he can be defeated.
Yep. Yeah, I think I have to join you. I want to pick Usman for the obvious reasons, but the vibes are too strong in the other direction.
Yep. All right. Well, there it is, and that ends segment 2. When we come back, we have a number of other fights to touch on much more briefly than we did those two. Magomed Ankalaev and how he's going to lose to Johnny Walker. In addition to that, we may also touch on Tim Elliott, Muhammad Mukayev, Javid Basharat, Victor Henry. It's a pretty solid looking, a bit mixed, but there's quite a few highlights in this undercard. We're going to touch on as many of them as we can after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Okay, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We're talking about some light heavyweights now. Show wouldn't be complete without some light heavyweights, and boy are they light heavyweights of two vastly different descriptions. The guy who doesn't know how he's supposed to win fights, Magomed Ankalaev, versus the guy who doesn't know how to fight, Johnny Walker. I mean, I can't actually convince myself that Ankalaev loses this fight. I can't envision him losing to Johnny Walker. But also I can sense it in my bones. That
right?
that it's Johnny Walker just doesn't play by the rules of how fights are supposed to go. He's really big. He thinks he's way better at everything than he actually is. And Ankalaev's never failing ability to just fight exactly the wrong kind of fight against basically anyone.
Yeah, he's a real snatching defeat from the jaws of victory fighter.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that he is obviously extremely successful. I mean, yeah, on paper, this is a cataclysmic mismatch.
Yeah.
Ankalaev should absolutely thrash him pretty much anywhere that he wants.
Yeah.
He can, if he wants to strike with Johnny Walker, I'm sure that he can, and he would probably obliterate him there.
Yeah.
Or at least have a very stinky fight with him.
Yes, a stinky fight where his strikes are just way more efficient and yeah, he throws jabs.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he might get into some troubles with getting as he did against Jan Blachowicz, he might get his leg kicked out a bit, but
yep.
He's Johnny Walker is not Jan Blachowicz.
No. You said a mouthful there, friend. Johnny Walker, he's a lot of things. He's not Jan Blachowicz.
But his main concession to being like to having a game, having something that he wants to do.
Yeah.
As he's, evolved into his true SBG Island form, is that he's just gonna. He's basically, SBG has taken up the reins of Jackson Wink, in this being their primary approach for a lot of their fighters. Is that he's just a kicker from long range.
Yep.
That's the fight that Johnny Walker wants nowadays.
Yep.
He just wants to kick people from long range because he can't box, he can't wrestle.
Yep.
And he's actually okay in the clinch, but, that's going to be a safety zone for when the kicking doesn't work.
Yeah, and also, how okay in the clinch has he had to be against the likes of, I don't know, who did he even beat in the clinch? Ryan Spann? Justin...
Corey Anderson, didn't he beat Corey Anderson in the clinch? Oh, no, sorry, he lost to Corey Anderson, he got thrashed by him. No, it was Serkinov.
Serkinov, no? Yeah. I think he did beat Serkinov in the clinch.
Khalil Roundtree.
Khalil Roundtree elbowed his face off, yeah.
Yeah. He could have had some natural talent there, but...
Yeah, but these are not guys who will just easily take him down. Which Magomed Ankalaev, here's the thing I hope for. Magomed Ankalaev, we agree, absolutely deserved not to win against Jan Blachowicz, because he did not respond in nearly a lively enough manner to the problems that were arising in that fight. He persisted in trying to have a sort of methodical, slow pressure, jab-focused boxing match with the man who was chopping his leg off, and not until he was crippled, when he needed to, did he decide to lean on his wrestling, which, go figure, allowed him to completely dominate Jan Blachowicz on the ground. Jan Blachowicz, who is a better wrestler and grappler than Johnny Walker, if perhaps not quite as big, but technically, I think he's superior in basically every regard. And he smushed him on the ground, as he should be smushing everybody in this division on the ground. What I hope is that he has learned anything. That's what I'm hoping for here. Has he learned something?
You hope that he's looked at Johnny Walker getting absolutely crushed in the wrestling by Nikita Krylov.
Yeah.
And then seen Krylov get wiped out by Jan Blachowicz, and then thought to himself,
Duh.
You know what?
Yeah.
Maybe I am good at this wrestling thing.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not actually the best striker in the world. But maybe I am good at wrestling, especially in this division.
Yeah, where very few people can wrestle at all. So I'm picking Ankalaev, because if he hasn't learned that lesson, he is an even bigger idiot than I could have possibly imagined. It would be such a massive failure of preparation for him to come into this fight not being ready to take Johnny Walker down immediately. First kick he throws, boom, shoot, drive him off his feet, and start suffocating him and wearing him down. But it's not impossible that he has not learned that lesson. I cannot count it out that he will somehow find a way to get his leg torn off by a substantially worse kickboxer than Jan Blachowicz, or get knocked out or something. He's been dropped before. He'll
just have a stinky 2 rounds, and then in the third round he'll get dropped, and then he'll go for a takedown, and then immediately get it and be seconds away from a submission at the end of the fight, and then lose 29-28.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, you have to pick him.
You have to pick him. Even if it was a kickboxing match, I would pick him over Johnny Walker. Even the new and quote-unquote improved Johnny Walker.
Yeah.
He's just not very good. He's just huge and athletic. Anyway, it would be very funny if he manages to lose it, though.
Yeah. Anyway, reluctantly picking Ankalaev, hoping for the somehow predictably stupid decision making that could see him somehow not win this extremely winnable matchup. All right, next up on the docket, a few quick words about Muhammad Mokaev. This feels like a quick return. He blew his knee out.
He does fight a lot.
He blew his knee out.
Yeah, that is true.
That was his last fight, right? Against Jafel Filho?
Yeah.
And that was in March.
Yep.
That's at like the very low end, from what I know, of the time it takes to recover from what I assume was an ACL surgery or something akin to it.
Okay, apparently it wasn't actually like a ligament tear.
He tear his meniscus or something?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay, all right. Shorter recovery time.
Partial MCL, apparently.
Well, it was a ligament tear, just not a total one.
Yeah. So, apparently that's not too bad. Apparently he said that like he had 6 or 7 cracks in his knee when the guy was going for the knee bar on him. Yeah. Apparently that's a grade 2 partial MCL tear.
Well,
but then he was like, and it'll only keep me out for 6 to 8 weeks. So yeah, it's okay. Just getting right back in there then.
Sure. I guess based on that, maybe he's had a, full healthy training camp and he's young. He's just recovered as fully as possible. Still, it does feel like quite a quick turnaround from a ligament tear of the knee.
Yeah.
And I think that this is a very winnable fight for Mokaev at the same time. Looks like he's ripe for a prospect loss because Tim Elliott is big and a very, very scrappy, scrambly wrestler and can be quite an authoritative, pressuring striker when he wants to be. And also is just like a completely dirty maniac who will grab your shorts and your gloves and, stick his fingers in your eyes and grab the fence and whatever he needs to do to win. He is a grimy motherfucker. And basically Mokaev has, not that he's not beaten good fighters, but he has not really taken on an opponent anything like Tim Elliott, and certainly not one with Tim Elliott's experience at a super high level.
Yeah, most of Mokaev's fights have been, again, him gutting through that knee injury was very impressive, but most of his fights have been characterized by control.
Yeah.
Mostly from his end, but they've been, wrestling and control based and mostly not particularly fun to watch, can be said. Yes, Tim Elliott is someone who fights everywhere and just kind of keeps coming and is a good grappler and a good wrestler and a very good transitional fighter. I mean, he was, he gave significant trouble to like Demetrius Johnson.
Yeah.
Moving between the wrestling and clinching phases.
Yeah, took him down like 5 times in like the first 4 minutes of the fight.
Also, hurt him, I think.
Yeah.
Like a knee from the clinch.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just big as well.
And he has also, I think, a benefit of his now very long experience, again, at a consistently super high level, seems to have largely sorted out the stamina issues that plagued him for much of his career.
He was a very self-destructive.
Yeah.
Very self-destructive fighter, I think, for quite some time.
Like against Demetrius Johnson, just one example, where maybe you shouldn't be blasting a guy off his feet 5 or 6 times in the first 3 or 4 minutes. Maybe you should slow down and kind of work with the advantage you've got. But yeah, I
think in that fight, he was probably basically, he was not going to win it. So it was, his best chance was just to try and somehow crush Demetrius Johnson early, but he's Tim Elliott and can't finish people.
Yeah. But he does seem really consistent round to round these days. Steady, high output.
Yeah.
Plenty of wrestling, a lot of striking, and maintains that pace a lot better than he used to. I mean, I wish I had like a more detailed read on the ins and outs of the grappling matchup here, but I don't know. I mean, are you leaning one way or the other on this one? It's hard to call.
I think I'm leaning towards Tim Elliott, to be honest.
Yeah.
I just think that like Makayev has been dictating the wrestling so much in his fights and there's a number of ways in which that won't necessarily happen against Tim Elliott. One, because Tim Elliott is huge.
Yep.
And just a good wrestler. And also because, Tim Elliott's huge and he's going to be far away a lot of the time. He's just going to be doing his, hobo cruise thing.
Yeah.
Galloping around on the back foot. I mean, he's no great shakes as a defensive wrestler. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get put down.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just see it as like being a very awkward fight for someone who's constantly had to, who's been a one and done puncher and a, singular control level grappler.
Yeah. I mean, I just kind of get the, a similar feeling, that I have about Chimaev's fight where I'm like, what is the actual skill barrier, and the physicality barrier to Makayev's, the incredible success that he's been enjoying. And I think basically without exception, his opponents have been not notably stronger than him. Cause I think he's a fine athlete, but he doesn't look like overwhelmingly fast or overwhelmingly powerful to me. Just the eyeball test. But all of the opponents have been just like significantly worse than him in wrestling and grappling. Like Malcolm Gordon, that's like the next most experienced guy he's fought, and it's like, of course he out-wrestled Malcolm Gordon. I'm kind of leaning in the direction of the veteran pick myself.
And whilst Tim Elliott has lost a bunch of times, it's all to really good people.
Yeah, exactly.
This would be very good company for Makayev to find himself in at the age of whatever he is now.
Sure.
A list of people Tim Elliott has lost to: Mateus Nicolau, Brandon Royval, Askar Askarov, Davison Figueiredo, Ben Nguyen, probably the worst person he lost to in his entire career, frankly.
Yep.
Demetrius Johnson, Zach Makovsky, Joseph Benavidez, Ali Bagatinov, and John Dodson. And then, some other people in his early career. But
generationally elite fighters.
Yeah, we're all where no one in that list was outside the top 10.
Yeah.
And most of them, were title contenders or champions.
And all of them, in their primes, not 23-year-old, relatively untested prospects. Like Makayev. So.
Yeah.
Sort of.
So, if he wins this, tremendously impressive, is what I'm saying.
And I think he could do it.
I think he does have to show more than we've seen.
Yeah, I think he could do it. He is super single-minded and seemingly tireless with his wrestling game. And as you said, Tim Elliott has been taken down plenty. It is probably the weakest aspect of his game overall. In fact, not even just in the wrestling. His defense overall. Submission defense, takedown defense, striking defense. These are all weak points for him. But as long as he can just sort of keep the scrap going, it's pretty easy to envision him just sort of introducing Makayev to the things he doesn't know he doesn't know. So, yeah, sort of a vibes pick, but these are the kind of matchups where I am inclined to take the old dog.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just an activity pick.
Yeah.
But, at some point, Makayev, he either has to be, ferociously dangerous with his offense if he's going to parcel it out quite as much as he does. Or he simply has to raise his work rate. And throughout these fights, he's not really doing that.
Yeah.
And Tim Elliott is just someone who just does a lot. Just does a lot of stuff.
Yep.
And, unless Makayev is going to be wiping people out somehow at this kind of level, kind of have to pick Elliott.
Need to see it. That kind of pick.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think we should probably wrap it up there, actually. We're going to be well over like an hour and a half at this point. And we are recording behind schedule. I have to jump over and do a show with a significantly less charming co-host, it has to be said.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. He actually has the nerve to call himself the host and me the co-host. Which, like, can you imagine that?
Son of a bitch.
Doesn't make any sense. But we're going to wrap it up there. For those who want to hear our thoughts on last weekend's Fight Night card, Edson Barboza, Sadiq Youssef, I really, really do want to talk about that. I think, Phil, as long as you're cool with it, we will try to do a bonus episode where we will look back. I mean, you will all have completely forgotten that it ever happened by next week. But next week, likely we'll need to do a bonus to cover some extra shit from UFC 294 and the following card. And I would love to at least get some time in there talking about Barboza Youssef, if not some other highlights from that card. So, as long as you're cool with that, Phil, we are going to talk about Barboza Youssef in the near future, just not today.
Works for me.
Cool. All right, folks. Well, we hope you enjoyed the show. Twitter. I'm actually on, I'll say it again. I guess I'll start plugging it here. I'm going to try to start using Blue Sky more. I'm at King Typo over there. So go find me over there. Twitter is just becoming increasingly noxious, and I logged on to talk about the Barboza Youssef card, and otherwise I have been hardly looking at it because I just don't really enjoy it that much anymore. I have like no followers to speak of over on Blue Sky as of right now, but you could become some of the lucky few who get my incredible social media content. just can't miss. So go find me over there at King Typo. Otherwise, on Fight Nights, you're still going to see me posting on Twitter at Boxing Bush. Phil is over there at Evil Greg Jackson. Check out the Patreon. At the very least, next week we will be talking about Barboza Youssef and probably a bunch of other stuff in the bonus episode. And we appreciate your support. We appreciate you listening. We appreciate you. And if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.